If someone with an avoidant attachment style is genuinely supposed to be in your life, the way things unfold usually won't look like a typical romance. Honestly, the start might feel almost the reverse of that. There's often a strong pull between the two of you, but then suddenly they pull back, go quiet emotionally, or seem torn about what they actually want. One moment, everything feels tightly bonded, and the next, it can feel like a door just closed on you with no explanation given. That doesn't automatically mean what you have isn't real. With someone avoidant, closeness rarely grows in a smooth, predictable line. Instead, it tends to cycle through closeness, unease, pulling back, and then another try at getting near again. From the outside, this can look a lot like flakiness or a sign that their feelings were never real. But often, that push and pull actually says a lot about how this person deals with emotional closeness. The first big clue is usually a bond that feels unusually strong for both sides. And there's something about it that's hard to put into plain words. You might feel like you get each other without needing long explanations. Talking feels natural, almost easy. Being around them can feel oddly familiar, like you've known them much longer than you actually have. And here's the key part. The avoidant person feels it too. They might not say it out loud. They may even try to talk themselves out of believing the connection is as strong as it feels. But underneath, they're experiencing that same warmth, pull, and sense of safety that you are. Around you, they might feel truly seen in a way they're not used to. They might feel accepted without having to perform or guard every soft part of themselves. And right there is where the tension starts. As the closer they get to you, the more exposed they can end up feeling. For someone who leans avoidant, real emotional closeness can stir up fears that honestly have little to do with you as a person. It's not that they're scared of you specifically. In fact, they might be pulled toward you more than they'd admit. The fear comes from what that closeness represents. They may start worrying about needing you too much, but they may worry about losing their sense of independence, giving someone else too much emotional influence over them, or getting so attached that heartbreak becomes almost guaranteed. The very same person who makes them feel at ease can also become the one who makes them feel most exposed. That's what fuels the push-pull pattern. They move toward you because part of them genuinely wants this. Then, once things start to feel emotionally intense, something in them pulls back automatically. They get more distant, go quieter, or suddenly claim they need space. From where you're standing, it can seem like their feelings just vanished overnight, but usually those feelings never actually left. Their inner alarm system just got overloaded by how close things got. This is exactly why being with an avoidant person can leave you second-guessing everything. You might ask yourself, if they really cared, why would they keep backing away? But pulling back emotionally doesn't always mean someone doesn't love you. Sometimes it just means they never learned how to stay emotionally close without feeling like they're losing themselves in the process. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They see the distance and instantly decide the whole relationship was fake. They read withdrawal as rejection and silence as confirmation that they were the only one invested. Sometimes that space is simply how the avoidant person copes with emotions that feel like too much to handle at once. That doesn't mean every relationship with an avoidant person is bound to succeed, and it definitely doesn't mean you should keep chasing someone who keeps hurting you. A real connection still needs effort, emotional maturity, honest communication, and consistency from both people involved. But when an avoidant person truly values what they have with you, something important starts to shift over time. They begin to realize that being close to someone doesn't mean disappearing into them. They start to understand that they can love someone and still hold on to who they are. They can lean on another person without feeling powerless. They can open up without feeling controlled. And slowly, the distance between you two starts to feel less necessary. It stops being a cycle of chasing and retreating and starts becoming something built on learning to stay. That's usually the real turning point. Because a relationship with an avoidant person isn't measured by how much they miss you the moment you're gone. It's measured by whether they eventually figure out how to stick around even when closeness starts to feel uncomfortable. When they choose to talk instead of vanish, honesty instead of shutting down, and connection instead of constantly running. That's when the relationship genuinely starts to shift. So if you're in a connection that feels intensely strong but also confusing, try not to judge the whole future of it based only on the times they pull away. Watch what happens after. Do they come back with more understanding of themselves? Do they own up to the distance? Do they actually try to figure out what happened? Do they slowly get more comfortable with being emotionally close? Because that's usually where the real truth shows up. The goal was never to convince someone avoidant to love you. The real goal is figuring out whether they're capable of growing into a relationship where love doesn't mean either person has to keep running from it. And if this connection really is meant to last, the biggest shift won't just be that they keep coming back. It'll be that bit by bit, they stop feeling that urge to leave every time closeness starts to build. They might also be carrying a deep fear of getting hurt in a way they can't control or stop. And once the relationship starts moving past the surface and into something emotionally real, that fear can suddenly take the wheel. Instead of moving closer, they start putting up distance. This is usually when the other person starts to panic a little. You might feel the urge to reach out more, over-explain yourself, ask for constant reassurance, or somehow prove your love is enough to make them stay. You might tell yourself that if you just communicate better, give more affection, or show how much you truly care, they'll finally stop retreating. But honestly, that approach can end up adding even more pressure. When a connection actually has real potential, the shift usually happens once you stop trying to control their retreating and instead change how you react to it. You start to realize their withdrawal might not be a judgment on your worth at all. It might simply be their way of shielding themselves from feeling too vulnerable. It doesn't mean you should tolerate behavior that hurts you or brush aside your own needs. It just means you stop treating every bit of distance as solid proof that they've stopped caring. Instead of reacting out of fear, you start responding from a place of emotional steadiness. You stop chasing every time they pull back. You stop trying to force conversations before they're ready. You give them space, but without abandoning your own life, your own limits, or your own sense of self. And that shift alone can completely change the dynamic. Maybe for the first time, the avoidant person feels closeness without feeling trapped inside it. They can tell that you care, but they can also see you're not relying on their constant attention just to feel okay. You're there, but you're not chasing them nonstop. You're emotionally available, but you're not pushing them to match your vulnerability instantly. That combination creates something they may rarely have felt before: emotional safety with zero emotional pressure. And oddly enough, that's often what makes it easier for them to come back toward you. After pulling away, they may slowly start reaching out again. It might begin small, a text, a short conversation, a casual attempt to reconnect. Then the closeness starts building once more. And eventually, you might notice the same cycle happening again. They get closer, then something inside them feels uneasy. They step back, and later they return. At first, this pattern can feel draining, like nothing is actually improving. But there's one important thing worth paying attention to. When the relationship is genuinely heading in a healthier direction, the pattern itself doesn't stay exactly the same each time. Every return starts to look just a little different. The stretches of distance may start getting shorter. Instead of vanishing for a long stretch, they might only need a bit of space. Instead of shutting down completely, they might actually tell you what they're feeling. Instead of taking weeks or months to reconnect, they may come back much faster. And when they do return, the bond can feel even deeper than before. This doesn't mean everything suddenly becomes flawless. There can still be hesitation. There can still be moments of doubt. There may still be times their gut reaction is to retreat when things feel like too much. But the difference is you start noticing actual movement. Progress with someone avoidant tends to look subtle at first before it becomes obvious. It might look like them staying in the conversation a bit longer than usual. It might look like them opening up about something they usually keep buried. It could just be a short message after taking space. Instead of leaving you wondering if they're gone for good, those small shifts matter because eventually the avoidant person starts learning something that once felt nearly impossible. Being close to someone doesn't automatically mean giving up their freedom. They can be in a meaningful relationship and still stay true to who they are. They can care deeply without becoming totally dependent. They can let someone into their emotional world without handing over control of their identity. And once that idea starts to sink in, the relationship can slowly shift from running away from closeness to actually learning to sit with it. The goal here isn't to make an avoidant chase you through manipulation or calculated distance. It's not about playing games or acting like you don't care. It's about building a healthier dynamic where both people are free to choose connection. You stay grounded in yourself, and they start discovering that intimacy doesn't have to cost them their independence. That's when the push and pull starts to lose its grip. The returns get more intentional. The pulling away gets less extreme. Conversations get more honest, and the emotional bond starts resting on trust instead of uncertainty. Because eventually, the avoidant person isn't just learning to trust you. They're learning to trust what happens when they actually let someone in. They start to see that closeness doesn't have to end in pain, control, abandonment, or losing themselves. Tie, and that realization can become the base for something far steadier than what they were able to give you at the start. They start to notice that you're not trying to mold them into someone else. You're not trying to control their choices, force them to open up, or make them dependent on you. You're simply letting them be who they are while still holding on to your own standards and boundaries. And as that sinks in, their walls can slowly start to come down. It almost never happens overnight. The walls don't vanish because of one perfect conversation or one emotional moment. Instead, they come down bit by bit. A little more honesty here, a little more openness there, a willingness to stay present through conversations that once would have made them squirm. Meanwhile, you're going through your own shift too. You become more emotionally steady. You stop letting every change in their mood dictate yours. Their silence doesn't send you spiraling anymore. Their need for space doesn't automatically make you question your own worth. You start building that sense of security from within instead of constantly looking to them for it. And that changes the whole relationship. You can still want them deeply without making them responsible for keeping you emotionally stable. You choose to be with them because you genuinely value what you have, not because you feel like you can't function without them. There's a big difference between choosing someone and needing someone. When you choose them, you're basically saying, I want you in my life, but I'm still whole on my own. That kind of balance gives a relationship space to breathe. Because someone avoidant often struggles to stay connected when they feel like someone is holding on so tightly. There's no room left to just be themselves. At the same time, being close to an avoidant person means you have to stop reading every bit of withdrawal as a personal attack. Their need for space might trigger something in you, but it doesn't have to control you. You can notice the distance without instantly assuming the worst. You can care about them without chasing after them. You can give them room without abandoning yourself in the process. And when both people start operating from that healthier place, something interesting begins to happen. The relationship becomes less about fear, less about one person chasing while the other runs, less about proving love, and more about letting trust build naturally over time. Eventually, there may come a quiet moment where you just realize something shifted. It probably won't come with some big dramatic announcement. There might be no grand speech, no sudden confession, no movie-style moment where everything gets magically fixed. You'll just notice it. The person who once had to bolt the second things got emotionally intense isn't running quite as far anymore. They might still need space, but that space feels different now. They don't vanish completely. They don't slam every door shut. They start finding ways to stay connected even while they're working through their feelings. And maybe most importantly, they start opening up more often. They tell you things they used to keep locked away. They let you see sides of themselves that once felt too risky to show. They start actually talking instead of expecting you to just read their silence. Those changes might look small from the outside, but they can reflect a huge shift happening internally. Because someone avoidant getting comfortable with closeness usually isn't about one massive breakthrough. But it's about hundreds of small moments where they choose not to run. It's about realizing that being vulnerable doesn't automatically mean losing control. And while they're learning that lesson, you're learning something too. You're discovering that loving someone doesn't mean constantly trying to keep them close. You don't have to chase every time they take a step back. You don't have to keep proving your worth to them. Thus, you don't have to sacrifice your own peace just to hold the relationship together. Instead, you become someone who can stand firmly on your own 2 feet while still leaving the door open for real connection. That's when the relationship starts to feel different. Not because every problem disappears, but because both people are handling those problems from a healthier place now. The avoidant is learning to stay, and you're learning that you don't have to grip so tightly for someone to stick around. That balance is what turns a confusing push and pull into something far more stable, intentional, and emotionally secure. Eventually, they don't just learn to tolerate closeness. They start actively choosing it. They stop treating intimacy like something to survive and start seeing it as something they genuinely want in their life. They might still have moments of hesitation, but the difference is fear no longer gets to make every decision for them automatically. And that's when you really start to understand what's been happening this whole time. The relationship didn't make it this far because things were easy. It survived because both of you changed enough to meet somewhere in the middle. The avoidant had to learn that love doesn't automatically mean losing freedom, control, or their sense of self. And you had to learn that loving someone doesn't mean chasing them every time they pull away or trying to talk them into staying. Both of you had to grow in ways that probably felt uncomfortable at first. You had to build patience without slipping into passivity. They had to build vulnerability without feeling like they were giving up their independence. And somewhere in between those two shifts, the relationship starts finding a healthier rhythm. So if you're currently stuck in a relationship where someone avoidant keeps getting close, pulling back, and eventually coming back around, don't just watch the cycle itself. Look at what's happening inside that cycle. That's where the real story lives. Ask yourself what's actually changing. Are they becoming a bit more emotionally available than before? Are they talking instead of disappearing? Are the periods of distance getting shorter? When they come back, are they showing up with more openness, ability, and understanding? Do they seem more willing to talk about what they're feeling instead of instantly shutting down? And just as important, take a look at yourself too. Are you getting calmer? Are you less consumed by their silence? Are you building a stronger sense of security within yourself? Can you give them space without feeling like you're losing them entirely? Can you love them without letting their behavior define your worth? Can you keep living your own life even when they pull away for a while? If the answer to these questions is slowly turning into yes, then something meaningful is happening. The relationship is evolving, and sometimes that evolution is so gradual you barely notice it while you're living through it. You'll probably still have hard days. You'll still misread each other sometimes. There may still be moments where old fears creep back in and one of you slips into familiar habits. But the difference is neither of you stays stuck there forever. You bounce back faster, you communicate better, you understand each other more deeply. You start recognizing each other's triggers instead of reacting to them right away. And little by little, the relationship grows stronger than the patterns that once threatened to tear it apart. That's why a connection with someone avoidant can end up being such a powerful experience for both people involved. It doesn't just ask you to fall in love, it asks you to grow. It can teach the avoidant person how to stay present even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. It can teach you how to love without losing yourself in the process. It can push both of you to face fears, insecurities, expectations, and emotional habits that might have stayed hidden in a simpler relationship. Sometimes a connection like this brings out parts of you that you didn't even realize needed healing. Your fear of being abandoned might become impossible to ignore. Their fear of depending on someone might become impossible to hide. And instead of letting those fears run the relationship forever, both people eventually get the chance to understand where those reactions actually come from and choose to respond differently. That kind of growth can completely reshape what the connection means, because the strongest relationships aren't necessarily the ones that never face distance, fear, or uncertainty. Sometimes they're the ones where two people figure out how to move through those challenges without losing themselves or each other. But the relationship shifts from avoiding discomfort to learning how to handle discomfort side by side. So don't judge the future of the relationship purely on how strong the chemistry feels. Intensity can pull two people together, but intensity alone can't build stability. Someone can be wildly attracted to you and still not be capable of building a healthy relationship. Someone can miss you like crazy and still need to develop the emotional tools to stay consistently connected. What matters more is what happens once that initial intensity fades. Do both people grow wiser? Do they become more emotionally mature? Do they learn to communicate instead of just react? Do they slowly get better at meeting each other's needs without giving up their own identity? Do they start taking ownership of their own emotional patterns instead of expecting the other person to constantly fix them? That's the real transformation. And if a relationship is genuinely meant to last, you won't just keep watching the same cycle repeat forever. You'll see movement. You'll see growth. You'll see two people who once struggled to understand each other slowly learning to meet in the middle. The avoidant doesn't need to turn into a completely different person, and you don't need to become someone who endlessly waits, tolerates, or chases. Instead, both of you grow into healthier versions of yourselves. They learn that closeness can actually be safe. You learn that distance doesn't always equal rejection. They learn to stay. You learn to stay grounded. They learn that opening up doesn't mean giving up their independence. You learn that giving someone space doesn't mean neglecting your own needs. And eventually, the relationship stops being about who's chasing and who's running. It was about two people who are consciously choosing each other. That's the quiet shift most people never even notice. The connection doesn't last because the feelings were overwhelming. It lasts because the people inside that connection evolved, because love turned into more than just chemistry. It became patience, it became self-awareness, it became emotional responsibility. It became the ability to talk things through when silence would have been so much easier. It became the courage to stay present when fear was telling one person to run and the other to chase. And in the end, that's what gives a difficult connection a real shot at becoming a lasting one. Not how badly you wanted each other at the start, not how many times someone came back, not how painful the separation felt, how much you both actually learned along the way. Because the real sign of a meaningful connection isn't just that you can't stay away from each other. It's that over time, you both become capable of being together in a healthier way. The avoidant becomes less afraid of closeness. You become less afraid of distance. They become more willing to talk. You become more capable of trusting without needing constant reassurance. And together you build something that neither of you could have created out of fear alone, a relationship where closeness doesn't feel like a threat, where independence doesn't feel like rejection, and where love doesn't require either person to disappear into it. That's the point where the whole cycle finally starts to transform. The push and pull loses its grip. The connection becomes more intentional, and what once felt so confusing finally starts to make sense. Because sometimes the clearest proof that a relationship is becoming real isn't that everything suddenly turns perfect. It's that both people are getting better at handling the very things that used to tear them apart, and in the end, that's what really makes the difference. Not the intensity, not the chasing, not the fear of losing each other, the growth. Because when two people grow enough to meet each other halfway, love stops being something they're simply feeling. It becomes something they're learning how to build.